Leadership changes as responsibility grows. What once worked no longer scales. Today, I'm speaking with Richard Wilson, SVP at Astellas Pharma, who has navigated leadership through expanding scope and complexity. Hi, Richard.
Hey, Cindy. Great to reconnect.
Awesome. As your role and scope grew, what shifted most in how you showed up as a leader? And how did that shape the way you created clarity for your team when things were not fully defined?
That's a really great question. For me, the first thing I would go to is confidence. I think as we start our careers and we're early in our journey, we're accustomed to thinking about where do we take our cues from, which leaders do we think are visionary, who gives us the best path ahead, how do we get aligned so that we can be successful in our work. I think as we progress and we get more senior, then those cues start to disappear. The number of clarifying points becomes fewer, and the path ahead becomes a little bit less clear. I think that sense that leadership becomes a lonelier experience is very true. And so at some point, you realize that actually it's on you to start to create that clarity, to lay the breadcrumbs, and to really think about how you can create the cues for those that are either reporting to you or influenced by you. And so it becomes, how do you set that path, that tone, and that vision for the organization and for the people who are going to now do the work, now that you're leading perhaps more than doing? That relies on being able to have enough confidence that people are going to want to follow you, and also having a strong enough vision that people can see their work in the setting of something bigger, something more ambitious, maybe even a little audacious. That's something that emerges over time. It's hard to explain until you start to really experience it. To me, that degree of confidence is something you have to develop a little bit of self talk in order to get proficient with. You need to learn to really lead despite ambiguity, and especially in the pharmaceutical business, we're always making decisions and working out how to act with imperfect information or with a degree of risk we just can't remove. So again, that comes back to that need as a leader. You have to try and provide that sense of certainty, or at least transparency about what we don't know, and need to act in spite of that. The other thing I think is it forces you as a leader to think about, where are you going to find your source of inspiration? Who's going to give you feedback? Candidly, as you become higher up in an organization, you develop a bit of a situation where the amount of feedback you get starts to diminish. You tend to hear about bad news 10x more often than you hear about good news, and it tends to be 100 times stickier. So you have to start developing these new networks, if you will, these new sources where you can still pull your inspiration. Who's going to help you to develop that courage, that confidence to continue to lead others? As I think about the journey, I also think about the importance of having just a little bit of self doubt. No one likes leaders who tend to be self aggrandizing or too confident. It's a very much a bit of a knife edge here. I think you have to project confidence and humility. The last thing I'd say as well is you have to learn to really become proactive and think about not just what you say, but how you say it and where you say it. In these days, it's so important to have multiple internal and external communication channels. That means thinking about, how do you show up in a meeting? How do you show up in one-on-ones? How are you going to pull from what the vision is and what the path ahead looks like when you meet someone by the coffee machine? But also, what are your external communication plans? That means leveraging your channels that exist today. Maybe that's LinkedIn. Maybe it's an appearance at a conference. Maybe it's an interview or like this, or an appearance on a podcast. It really is important to think not just clearly about what is your vision, what is it you want people to know about, why should they care, but how do you show up, what messages you want to sprinkle in and again, and really make sure you leverage both those corporate and that personal brand that you need to build in order to be an effective leader.
Richard, thank you for sharing your perspective. What stands out is how leadership shifts from having answers to creating clarity and confidence for others. As responsibility grows, teams often look to their leaders for direction, even when the path is still forming. Leadership becomes the ability to move forward with purpose, even in ambiguity. Thank you.
Well said.